Good evening, everybody. I am Tele-Aviacion, and welcome to This Week in El Salvador. Let's jump right into it. I have to say that one of the big questions that a lot of people ask me is, what do you think will happen with El Salvador economically, judiciously, all of the different factors that El Salvador is dealing with? What will it be like in the near future? And my answer always is, within 10 years, I believe El Salvador will be as rich as Israel. That's quite a statement, considering that Israel is certainly one of the richest countries in the world per capita. Certainly a lot of poor people there, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But I have noticed in all of the time that I've visited El Salvador and some of the beautiful people that I met, there is an incredible dignity, an incredible sense of justice with a lot of the El Salvadorian people. They're just trying so hard to do well in a very, very difficult economic time, which they've had to deal with for many, many years. And it's kind of almost a certain amount of poetic justice to mention Israel, that they would do well as Israel, when you consider the incredible justice that they dispensed on the Jews that were coming or trying to leave that country. There was a gentleman by the name of Jose Arturo Castellanos, who was a consul general in Geneva, Switzerland, and he witnessed this injustice firsthand. And in 1942, well, even prior to that, he tried to talk to his subordinates and other people, I should say higher-ups in the government in El Salvador, to try to tell them what a horrible thing was going on in Germany. And unfortunately, none of them at the time really listened. But he did not let that stop him. And through the help of probably a rather significant underground group of people, most likely within the government, he was able to issue 40,000 passports, allowing the people to have literally El Salvadorian, or appear to have El Salvadorian citizenship. So these Jews from countries in Germany, France, Hungary, all over the area that needed incredible help, he was able to help them. And in fact, it was not, finally by the time 1944 election in El Salvador came along, the president, his name of all things was Castellanos Castro. And he even increased and really did all that he could to help the Jews, as far as being able to be repatriated and be given a place to stay and some sort of shelter. But it's just amazing, considering that this is something in history we never hear about. We never hear how incredibly kind the El Salvadorians were. And yes, obviously it was one man that helped, but an incredible amount of people to issue 40,000 passports must have also helped in that process too, and obviously felt the real call of justice. So to me, it is almost poetic justice that El Salvador should end up being as rich as Israel, and let it be done. I believe that they could be. And so that's the answer I give, and that's why it kind of pleases me in my heart to actually give an answer like that, because they so deserve it. But to go more into the issues, I mean, another issue with Israel, when you consider that, well, just all over the world, we have Israel and their treatment of the Palestinians, and not just now, but continuously. Imagine that you're sitting in your home, enjoying your free time, and all of a sudden an army invades your home and says, oh, this house is not yours. This property is not yours. And all of your neighbors, their property is going to be confiscated from them. This is what Palestinians have to deal with on a daily basis. Not to mention all the death. Of course, on both sides there's violence, but who by far is the stronger entity? It definitely is Israel, and there is a lot of injustice there. But it's not just there, all over the world. Look what Saudi Arabia is doing to Yemen. They're destroying it. They've been systematically destroying it for the last 4 years. And unfortunately, it saddens me to say that this country, the United States, is helping them do it. There's no excuse for that. I'm sure that they have arrangements, as we've discussed, based on the petrodollar, but in spite of that, it is certainly the most barbaric alternative to help them destroy not only Yemen, but their other neighbors, and to give them arms so that they can do the things that they do. Also consider other areas. There's Syria. There's many other areas. The United States has military bases all around the world. And I'm not saying that the United States does not do some good for the people and help in times of famine, and certainly has the capability of doing a lot more good than it does. But to get bogged down in these horrible wars, and then to start to criticize a country like El Salvador and to say that they are incredibly barbaric to their citizenry is really, it's the pot calling the kettle black. It's the most ridiculous thing. So to get into that, lately in the news, some of the biggest things that we've heard are talking about the gangs and what is happening with the gangs. And in fact, they don't even mention the arresting of gang members. They say the arresting of young citizens. Citizens are being terrorized and arrested. I have to tell you, based on the people I've seen, and I'm not talking about in the rich areas. I've been all over El Salvador and seen a lot of people, agrarian, people working on their farms, people that don't even have cars, that have horses that are doing their job, people rounding up cows, a lot of drivers that have tattoos, sporting tattoos on their legs and their arms. I asked them, what's going on? Just on the QT, I'm not filming them, just asking them, do they feel safe? Overwhelmingly. In fact, I haven't run into anybody that has told me that they don't feel so much safer and are so grateful for what Bukele is doing and what the Tele-Aviacion is doing to try to help El Salvador pass this horrible pandemic, the real pandemic, which is the gang problem. And I mean, everybody overwhelmingly is so happy that they don't have to worry about being shaken down by these gangs. I mean, these people can be absolutely ruthless. And unfortunately, it takes an almost ruthless government to have to deal with that sort of a scenario. If it wasn't for this, so many of the citizens of El Salvador would be forced to pay all sorts of amounts of money beyond what they can afford from their business to these pandillas, so that these pandillas can run their operations and their drug operations. And in fact, many of their family members are handling all of the economics in terms of the accounting and to make sure that different people get this amount of money. I mean, it is an incredible operation. It is a culture. In this country, we do not know anything about that type of a culture that is absolutely committed to destroying anybody who is law-abiding. They are so adamant about that culture that they have tattoos all over their body. And that's what's interesting, is I've spoken with so many people that had tattoos. But as long as they're not gang tattoos, the soldiers, the police ask them, and that's it. I know some people would say, they're being profiled. Well, that kind of woke politics we do not have in El Salvador. Maybe here in the United States, but it's not in El Salvador. But by far, there is not one place you can go, not one person that I've talked to that isn't incredibly happy about the way things are now. And they see tremendous opportunities in the future. Just consider no inflation, as I talked about before. But just having visited El Salvador about a week ago, I saw gas prices at $4.15 a gallon, diesel prices $4.05 a gallon. Can you imagine that here in the United States? If you really think of it, it is these fuel prices, and there are a few major, I'd call them cartels, oil companies in the United States and around the world that have sought this opportunity to totally devastate the whole economies of nations by raising the prices of fuel when they don't need to. There is plenty of fuel, not just in Russia, not just in the Ukraine, but plenty of fuel in the United States, Saudi Arabia, Venezuela, all over the place. But they see this opportunity to gouge people And this is what is really, really causing what we're calling inflation right now. And this is, of course, when fuel prices rise, food prices rise, any sorts of other commodities, electronics, automobiles, any type of product that has to be moved from point A to point B is being affected. And of course, it's affecting the world. But blame the oil companies on this. Don't just blame the issue with Russia and the Ukraine. It's totally short-sighted to not see that there's a greater connection here. But then look what El Salvador is doing to handle this, is they are supplementing these industries. They're supplementing the fuel industry, and so that it does not gouge the public and the business people that are trying to do better in El Salvador. Their industry, they are literally giving away seed and fertilizer to farmers so that they can continue to use their crops. So no matter what imports they were counting on helping them, that they know that they'll be self-sufficient enough to feed themselves. And this is the kind of planning and thought that is going into this government. It is a crisis. Bukele has called it a crisis, and he dealt with it from day one. He has not let not let anything go by without dealing with these issues. So I think that it is just incredibly important to state the incredible positive things that are happening in El Salvador. I have no doubt that certainly there are certain bad things that happen when you're rounding up 37,000 gang members. Of course, it isn't going to be absolutely totally clean and totally perfect. These people are going to rebel against you. There are going to be problems. There are going to be certain casualties. It's horrible. But consider what we have a country at war. And this is not just at war with somebody that's invisible, but at war with people that have tattoos announcing this is exactly who they are. This is who they identify with. So I think that's a very, very important thing to consider while we're doing this. Now, while I was in El Salvador, it was very interesting. They had some commissions that were discussing the banking reform. Now, banking has been, of course, one of the big issues when we talk about El Salvador. Bitcoin, thousands of people, 70% of the people there have been given the opportunity to have their own bank account for the first time. What is this bank account? It's called the Chivo wallet. The Chivo wallet allows them to have money in Bitcoin, or they can exchange that money for dollars. And they can use those dollars to buy whatever is on sale. Now, I admit, not everybody is accepting payments from the Chivo wallet, but these things take time. Even when the cologne was changed for the dollar back in 2001, it took years for people to get used to using the dollar. There are a lot of controversies over that, but nonetheless, anytime you introduce something new like that, of course it's not going to happen overnight. It hasn't even been a year. It'll be a year in September when Bitcoin was adopted as one of their national currencies. But back to the point that I made about the banking industry. It has been very, very unfair. It is here, but they mentioned, and quite a few people mentioned, members of the assembly, that banking, from their constituents' point of view, has been very unfair to them. In many instances, they're charging fees. So if you put $100 in you don't put a certain amount in a bank account, they're going to charge you like $10 every month. And $10 is an awful lot to the hardworking people of El Salvador, especially if you're not fortunate enough to have a lot of money. And the banks have absolutely no sympathy at all. They just take this money. And quite often, accounts are closed. And unless a person is an expert in banking law, the average person can't fight about it. So there will be reform in El Salvador, and they are really, really working on it. But it is slow. The economic system, everything that they're dealing with is as fast as the Tele-Aviacion and Bukele have acted. There are limits to how much speed that they can act, especially where the banking industry is concerned. But I know that they are heading in that right direction, and it's incredibly exciting to see this. I consider Bukele perhaps one of the most important presidents in the world because the world is watching his country. The world is watching El Salvador. At this point, I believe that they have already purchased about 2,500 Bitcoin. Like I've mentioned before, when people say he's totally wasted his money on Bitcoin and lost all this, so much value as a result, remember that he's only spent maybe 3% of what their taxable, the amount that they collect in taxes toward Bitcoin. It's very little in comparison. Also consider that he is aware, as I believe a lot of people are aware, that the United States will do anything that it can to tank the price of Bitcoin. They will literally destroy the whole stock market to do what they can to destroy Bitcoin. And as we're getting evidence of that recently with all of the, how the stock market has been reacting. It's fascinating to me because the biggest cause of this inflation that now the Federal Reserve is curtailing their spending, which I think in the long run is a good idea, but they're starting to raise interest rates. They're starting to stop people in an attempt, let's say, to stop people from spending money. In doing this, they have of course slowed down the economy and caused Bitcoin to go lower, as with the whole stock market. And I think they really, really like it. Now, there is a team, some people deny it, called the Plunge Protection Team that works through the president and through certain select members of Congress and the Senate to be able to deal with economic problems. And Bitcoin is an economic problem. And a great deal of the Western world is more than aware that it is and would like to do all they can to destabilize it. I frankly hope that they do, at least for the short run, because if it goes down to $16,000 or lower, you can bet that a lot of people are going to start hodling a lot more of it. There's a limited supply of Bitcoin, 21 million. There's a lot of gold out there. There's a lot of other commodities. You can print dollars till you have trillions. It's estimated that there's at least $400 trillion on the face of the earth in form of euro dollars, petrodollars, and God knows what people have hoarded. But there's an incredible amount of bills, and they can just keep printing more and more of them, but they cannot print more Bitcoin. There's a limit, 21 million. There are over 8 billion people on the earth. So that lets you know how incredibly scarce Bitcoin is, and certainly will be in the future. But I just want you to consider what is happening there and the various forces that are trying their best to spoil and destroy what El Salvador is creating for its people. The news that I read is the most dire, abysmal news you've ever read. It's coming from sources like Al Jazeera and the Wall Street Journal. I mention these all the time. The New York Times, the LA Times, and so many other publications that literally cut and paste the information from these publications to put them on theirs. Apparently, they want to save money and they don't want to have to pay their journalists any money to actually do real work and investigate situations. So they simply take articles that they like and cut and paste it. It's a shame what's happened to the journalistic world. And it's only in a few situations when some of even these journalists that have been unfair have to admit that certain good things are happening. For instance, about 18.4%, there's an 18.4% rise in the amount of people that are buying from El Salvador, that are buying land in El Salvador and products in El Salvador. And this comes from Forbes magazine, and this is the greatest amount of buying that has happened since 1960. I'd be willing to bet there's even more buying than they have even been willing to mention. It's just like when people say 70% of the El Salvadorians are satisfied with the job Bukele is doing, when everybody knows it's 91%. But they always try to get this little jab in there to try to make it sound like, or delegitimize the ability that they've shown to be able to strengthen their economy. I mean, imagine this economy is literally the people that are in El Salvador don't even realize, I mean, they know literally there's a war in Ukraine, but they're not suffering the effects from it. They're not suffering the effects of high oil or high food prices, because they're all being regulated by a government that really cares about them. And then the government creates and gets a much better tax base as a result, and then is able to help the citizenry even more, give computers to every child that is going to school in El Salvador, including handicapped children and blind children. And they're able to do all these incredible things to help people. And it's amazing that I think maybe if you're lucky, 5% of it is reported by some of the news sources, but denigrated immediately by their cry of injustice for the injustice that the pandillas, the maras, are suffering as a result of El Salvador, as if El Salvador is some sort of a rogue nation that is doing only evil to its people. It couldn't be farthest from the truth. But anyway, I wanted to point these things out. I went to El Salvador, I visited, I spoke with a lot of people. I was very happy with what I've seen. There's a tremendous amount of progress there. But I also have to say that things are going to take time. They always do. But I'm still going with my first, what I said initially was that I do believe that El Salvador within the next 10 years will be as rich as Israel. Anyway, thank you so much. I'm sorry that it's been so long since I've been here. I'm going to try to be a little bit more diligent with my broadcasts, but have a beautiful evening and God bless.